In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! Hello, and welcome back to Look at My Star Trek Toys, a little show in which me and Mike, we talk about Playmates 4.5-inch scale Star Trek toys from the 90s. How's it going, Mike?
Hey, it's going great. Just due to our recording schedule, Keith, we get a lot of Star Trek today, which is kind of cool. I want to tell you, not for nothing, and I think we're going to visit him later, so it somewhat fits. For our other show that we do on the channel about the practice from 20 years ago, you should check it out if you're not already. You don't have to be a fan of the practice to see Keith and I slowly lose our minds.
Yeah.
But for last week's episode, we do a little Easter egg at the end of each episode, and I have to go and find some B-roll to kind of splice in or whatever. Last week, or this week, whatever, we talked about evil Data, Data's evil twin. So,
Lord, yes,
I watched the big fight scene at the end, which made me realize I have to watch this episode. So, I actually dipped my feet in by watching the evil Data episode from season 1.
From season 1, wow, that is Data lore. That's exciting. And you saw the some really remarkable stunt work and choreography, and boy, they tried to make it look like Brent Spiner was doing both, but
not so much.
It was an adventure. It was an adventure. Okay, they got closer in that than some of the figures. So, but I think it's about time to talk about the figures, because that's why you're all here.
Yeah. What are we talking about today to start?
Well, today we have an interesting little episode, because we are going to talk about the figures they made for the movie Star Trek Generations. This was 1994. This was the first Next Generation film, and they actually started filming Star Trek Generations like a week or two after they wrapped Star Trek The Next Generation. So right after All Good Things, they went straight into production for Generations. And, well, a couple of things happened. And I'll talk about this a little bit, but I should give due where it is due, because most of this information I'm getting from a video here on YouTube. I'll put a link to it here by Junkball, who did a great video about these uniforms that we're going to talk about, because we are going to show an entire figure set of uniforms that were never seen. They were never used. So in 1994, they're starting the production of the movie, and they're like, you know what? We're about to switch to the movies. When the original series started the movie series, they're like, we need new uniforms. We're going to update the look. So they made some changes to the bridge. They gave Worf a chair, finally, and they updated the lighting. Looks great. The lighting looks great in this movie. The rest of the movie's not so good, not so hot. But they were like, hey, you know what? Let's update the uniforms. So they went to Robert Blackman, the costume designer, and said, give us some new uniforms. And so he started work on it, and they developed many generations of it, and they sent it to Playmates to make the action figures. And Playmates is like, okay, we're going to make a whole line of uniforms, or figures wearing these uniforms. And about 3 days into filming, they're like, nah, doesn't work. They had all sorts of trouble with the fabric. They had they sort of ran out of the fabric. They couldn't dye anymore. And Robert Blackman said he had tons of trouble with the structure of the uniform. Anyway, it was rushed. And so they bailed. They said, nope, we're not going to use them. We're going to use our original uniforms from the TV show. And then throughout the movie, in an odd and distracting fashion, slowly transfer everybody over to the Deep Space Nine uniforms, which were, the contemporary Starfleet uniforms at the time. But the problem is, they didn't even have time to make everybody on the show those uniforms, even based on the Deep Space Nine patterns. So when you see Generations, you see multiple people wearing the other cast members from Deep Space Nine's uniform. So you see Riker wearing Avery Brooks' uniform, and you see LeVar Burton wearing Colin Meaney's uniform, so everything doesn't quite fit. It was a whole big, weird disaster happening. And what happened was, you know what? Playmates made the figures. They sculpted them. They printed them. So they put them out. So we're about to talk about all of these figures wearing uniforms that were never seen.
So the movie ends up being a hodgepodge of 2 uniforms, but neither successfully, and the toy line is neither.
The toy line is neither. In fact, the only place in the universe you can really see what they were planning to do is in these figures. There are no pictures of the cast wearing this practically. They filmed for a couple of days, and we'll see it when we get to Geordi. And they filmed like one day wearing these uniforms and scrapped it and had to reshoot. So it's kind of crazy. They're really interesting. So we've wasted already 5 minutes of your time. We haven't even shown you any of these things yet. So let's hop right in and we can talk a little bit more about the uniforms. So let us start with figure 6918, Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Beaming in. Looking good. Okay, so what we have here, obviously there's no screenshot of Patrick Stewart wearing this. So this is actually one of the drawings they did, prototypes that Blackman did. And so you can see it looks pretty similar to the Next Generation uniform with a couple of little details. First off, you can see on their wrists, you have rank insignia. Now this is a throwback to the original series. So you saw, Kirk and Spock and whatever, they had stripes around their wrist to determine rank. But they had a duplicate rank up under the collar, as opposed to on the collar, like it was in Next Generation, it's on the chest. And the collar is also matching the color of the red there. So that's a little change too. The other big change was you can see along the chest, it's a double-breasted wrap over chest, and that is a throwback to the original series Wrath of Khan era uniform. So the red, where they had that sort of double-breasted feel. So they were definitely trying to do a little nod to the original series and a nod to the movie era, the original series movie era uniforms. And so you can sort of see what they were going for, but they couldn't structure it. It looked great on paper, but not so much in practicality. What do you think about these prototypes here?
So I potentially actually think these are some of my faves, because it is a nod to the original Next Generation kind of look that we all know. Yet there's an elegance, there's a class to it. I really love the double-breasted nature, and I think the pips, even though you could probably school me for quite a while on what each rank, how many pips, yada yada. We've talked about that before. I think it's more prominent there. It's kind of I like it better than on the collar. So in practice, or in theory, I like them better. But obviously, I guess it wasn't practical.
Yeah, well, I just think they didn't have time. They didn't have time to work it out. I mean, if you know from Next Gen, when Robert Blackman took over the costume design in season 3, that's where we have the change from the jumpsuit to the uniform that we're typically we see on Next Gen, that are the 2-piece. It took him a whole season of little adjustments here and there to get the fit right, to get the structure right, and it took him a whole season to sort of finalize what that was going to be. And he just had a couple of weeks here, and it just didn't pan out. So let us continue through, and we'll go through these relatively quickly because they're all pretty much the same. Let's take a look at 6919, Commander Riker. So here we are, same thing. Obviously, instead of 4 stripes for Captain, you have 3 stripes for Commander. But basically the same uniform, and you can see on the side, there is no image of Riker's uniform whatsoever that I was able to find on the internet. I'm sure they exist somewhere, but not available that I'm aware of. So this is what Jonathan Frakes would have been wearing Instead, he wore Avery Brooks' uniform, which the sleeves were too short for him. So you can see it oddly pulled up throughout the movie. Yeah, the same basic thing here. Now, if you're paying really close attention, or you bought these figures and like, what the hell? Mike, can you tell me what else is different about this figure than our regular line?
Well, let's see. He definitely looks a little bit heavier. I don't know a better way to say it. He looks a little bit more jacked up. The arms are in a reverse, like Hulk Hogan position.
Yeah.
Is the lack of arm articulation? Is that general? Like the elbow articulation? Yeah.
Yes, there you got it. So these figures have way less articulation than the standard figures. Normally, the figures bend at the elbows. They bend at the knees. Some of them even bend on the thigh so you can turn their feet out or in. But these have almost no articulation whatsoever. So
yeah,
not
these
only
much more model are more in the vein of the Turtles line whereas the general 4-inches are more G.I. Joe-y.
That's exactly right, because the Turtles didn't have articulation at the joints, or at least in their elbows and knees. So obviously, Playmates decided to save a little money on this. And so I think it should not be much of a surprise. The line didn't do so hot because it didn't look like the movie, and the articulation was bad. So certainly an interesting choice in what they did there. You know, part of it was definitely not their fault. You know, they had to get these things done for the movie to come out, but they had started filming with these uniforms. So I mean, and swapping out, if they went back to what they were, when the movie starts, they're just in the regular uniform. So those figures are already out. So it put Playmates in a tough position. So it's not necessarily their fault.
Keith, can I take a quick minute? And we don't have a lot of time to, we try to keep these at around 30 minutes, so I won't go too far down the rabbit hole. But it also strikes me, as we look at these toys, you've kind of introduced me to the wonderful wild world of customs. Right. I've been looking at a bunch of followed a bunch of people who do Star Trek customs as well as other lines I'm looking at. And some of these sculpting detail work they're able to do on these customs is absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
When you compare them A/B to some of the main product lines like we're looking at. And then you remember that, they're sculpting one or two for money over the internet. Obviously, when you're trying to do mass production of a line, you can't have as much detail. Though I wonder, Keith, moving into the future with some of these new lines, with laser printing available and things of that nature, are we going to see more detailed sculpting when it comes to mainstream action figures? Or is it still budget rules all?
Well, it's a good question, because it really comes down to how cheap can 3D printing get, and how can you scale that up? Because I imagine that a lot of these customs now are being sculpted on your computer and then 3D printed. Mm-hmm. Whereas these, if you have to do 100,000 of them, I don't know if 3D printing is practical financially or scalable, because not only do you have to do them cheaply, you have to do them fast and in bulk. So I don't know yet. I don't know if they're able to do 100,000 at that level of detail, because these are all done with molds.
Right.
So you sculpt it, you do just like you do your teeth, right? You want to get your braces, they do a negative of your teeth and then work from there. So who knows? Mr. Playmate, give us a call. Mr. or Ms. Playmate, let us know how you're going to be manufacturing these new figures.
Just to show you the speed with which we move, though, Keith, I will say that when I got my braces initially 5 years ago, they took molds. When I got refitted for a new retainer 2 weeks ago, 3D scan, and they just sent it to me in the mail.
Of course they did. Wow. Well, I got my braces in 1994. Actually, the same year this movie came out and this line came out. So they did the icky mold, and it was horrible. But
Keith, who else was wearing a weird uniform in that movie?
Let us move forward to 6920 Troi. Okay. So, because 90s, the women had to have an oddly different uniform. that emphasized certain aspects of
Their
anatomy.
intelligence?
Yes, their competence and intelligence, because Commander Deanna Troi definitely needed something else to emphasize certain things. So,
crazy.
you will see.
Could you even stand it up without the stand?
Not really. So, these are basically the same uniforms, except for the black portion goes all the way up right to the underboob. So we know that they're there, I guess. I don't know what the idea was there, but you can see that is the figure does match pretty well the drawing, the spec drawing they did there. So that's what Troi was going to wear, which, you know, again, is an improvement on what she wore early in the season. I think the transition to give her a Starfleet uniform was a great idea. It was the right thing to do. And so this what Troi would have been. Thoughts?
No thoughts. I will say, side note, you know, you and I talk about, and I think on our other podcast, things that we can't do sort of are magical to me. And even a quick sketch like that rendering on the right there, I have no facility for sketching or drawing. And so even that is like a marvel to me, how great some of these sketches are.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It is a specific talent, and we do have specific talents, but that is not one that I have either. So, yes, agreed. Agreed. All right, well then let us continue forth on our journey through these figures with number 6921. Let's see how Data looks. So, you know, again, it is sort of the similar deal. This is a standard Data figure in that new uniform. You know, none of these have the articulation, so they're all a little bit cheaper figures. But the face modeling, I think, is their standard Data head. Yeah, thoughts on Data?
No, the double-breasted nature of it doesn't really show up as well on the mustard yellow, so it's a little less cool than the Picard, in my opinion. But, you know, until we can paint him red and get you that Commander Data.
Yeah, right? I saw a bootleg, a fake one for sale on one of the Facebook boards that somebody just painted one of the other Datas red. Yeah, look out when you're buying those fancy ones. You know, honestly, about these, I don't like these uniforms that much, frankly. I think they look so similar to the ones previous that you barely even notice that they've updated the ones. And I don't like the collar. And I think the sleeves look a little confusing. I think what ended up happening, and you know, which is they went back to the drawing board and started over and did them for First Contact and created what I think are the absolute best Starfleet uniforms in the run of all of the shows and all the series and all the movies. Those are the absolute best uniforms.
Well,
so
I was going to ask you, so like that journey there, because do you think they kept them so similar initially? Because it's not a huge change. It's not a huge jump. Do you think that's because they were trying to encourage the audience to know that, look, it's if you know and love the show, the movie is just a translation of that? Because my thought would be creatively is, hey, we're going big budget, we're going to the big picture for the first time. Why don't we really reconceptualize these uniforms and make them, higher budge, really?
Well, yes, I think that's a part of it. I mean, I think they were already making a bunch of visual changes. The lighting, the difference in the lighting is so severe. And honestly, the lighting in Generations looks amazing. It's much better, but it's very different from what we're familiar with. You know, and the tiny little alterations to the ship and to the bridge. You know, we're Trek fans. We don't like change that much. So I think they were trying to hold our hand and walk us through it just a little bit, because it's, you know, after 7 years, and this was soon after, it's a little startling to see our heroes in such a different environment. All right, well, let us continue forward with figure number 6922, Worf. Okay, now here's another question for you, Mike. What's different about Worf?
Ponytail?
Yes, that is the ponytail that we see him wear in the later series after he gives up on his page boy Bob, his Pantene Pro V commercial that you see on the image to the right there. They gave him a much more natural ponytail, but this figure is missing the baldric.
Yes, the baldric. Also, is he wearing a corset of some sort? His waist is very skinny.
Well, you know, I think, again, this is where Playmates tried to save a little money, because I bet that is one of the standard body figures. Well, maybe not. I guess I'm looking at it in my hand. It is bigger, but they definitely tried to save some money and remove the baldric. And I don't know if the plan was not to have him wear a baldric anymore in the movie or not. But he never not has it for the rest of the series.
Is it generally sculpted on? I don't quite remember. Or is it a piece you
yes.
apply?
No, it is generally sculpted on, although the larger figure, it is free. So the 6-inch scale, it is a separate piece. But yeah, interesting. You know, again, like we never saw this, so I don't even know if this was accurate to what they planned or not. But yeah, so there's Worf in the uniform. Worf is I think the only other character in Generations to get a second figure other than Kirk, because in the opening series, as he's getting promoted, he's wearing this old-timey like ship uniform, and he got a figure for that, but nobody else did. All right, well, let us continue forward with the only character who we actually have a little bit of footage wearing this uniform, and that's 6923 Geordi. So Geordi, here you see on the image there, the only footage we have of these uniforms are from behind-the-scenes footage that was released on VHS, clearly, from the tracking issues you see in that picture, in the scene where he fought Dr. Saurian. So that is the only image that we see of anybody wearing those uniforms that I am aware of. And so they actually, I think that was might have been the only day they filmed with it, because when somebody brought up these uniforms, these abandoned uniforms, to LeVar Burton, he was like, wait, we had other uniforms? He didn't even remember them. And he's the one actually wearing it. So I think it happened so quickly that they bailed on it. And you understand why, because it's so expensive to reshoot stuff, that he didn't even remember that they had these uniforms. So, all right, well, let us continue forward and round out our main cast before we have a little bonus one with 6924 Dr. Beverly Crusher. Here is Dr. Crusher wearing the same basic uniform that we saw on Troi, emphasizing certain anatomy parts, and the later Crusher head that got used on a couple of other figures. Yeah, I mean, there's really not much to say. They're all basically there. She's got her commander sleeves, and if I put them side by side, I'm almost certain that both of these bodies are exactly the same. They just swapped out the head for Crusher and Troi. So, yeah, so that's that, which they frequently did, to save money. There's lots of, if you're basically the same type of person, we're just going to swap out your head. And this, again, Playmates was trying to save a little bit of cash here on this series, probably because they weren't sure how they were going to sell. All right, well, we have one more figure here of the unused uniforms on the movie Star Trek Generations. But it is not related to these new uniform updates. Let's hop over and tell the tale of 6930 Captain Kirk. in a spacesuit. Okay, so, I don't know if you've seen Generations, Mike, but what they try to do in the movie is hand off the series from Kirk to Picard. And so they find a way to get them both in the same movie and in the same scene. But William Shatner, as he tends to shat, decided, and I don't know if this was his idea or not, but the introduction of Captain Kirk, similar to Star Trek V, where he is doing insane rock climbing, decides to have a cool-ass entrance, and we meet him skydiving from orbit. And that is how we run into Kirk, because if we introduce Kirk in a later Star Trek movie, he's got to be doing something crazy and something that says, I'm not old, I swear. So he's skydiving, and so this is his suborbital skydive suit. And you can see in the picture there, they did film it, and this is how he ran into to his compatriots on the Enterprise, but they cut it from the movie. Oh. So so here's again the suit. Playmates made the figure. It's an interesting cool figure. It's shiny. It's more, there's a lot more going on there. Like, that's cool. But they never used it. Did he come
with a parachute or anything?
He did not.
Oh, that's
no. He came pretty much like this. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Remember those like army men that had parachutes to throw them up? Oh, those were fun. But yeah, so never used, but got a figure. So that makes 8 different figures that Playmates made and released for this movie, and none of them are seen on screen in the movie.
Wow, that's nutty. That is nutty.
Yeah, 8 of them, an entire line. It is certainly a fascinating little tidbit of Star Trek history. And thank you for sharing it with us and for looking at all of my mysterious figures. In fact, when I first got these figures, I'm like, wait, what? What's going on with this? I didn't even know. I did not know that they had... I had to do some research to figure out what was going on with these figures.
Before we go, we do have a minute or two. Do you have any of these boxed up so we can take a look at what the packaging looked like from the movie?
I do, although none of these figures particularly. So, if you would like to see the packaging from the Star Trek Generations series, you're going to have to go and look at our episode about the movie era bad guys, because I do have one of them, and we will talk about it on that episode. I'm not sure if we're going to release this one first or that one first, so either go back in your feed or wait a week, because it'll be there. So, or chances are you're watching this in 5 years and everything is released and we've already been canceled. So, so be it. Well, thank you for watching. Mike, if people want to talk to us beyond the YouTubes below, how do they do that?
Well, got to tell you, the YouTubes below is a great place to do so because it's the easiest for us to check. In addition, you can check out, look at my Star Trek Toys at gmail.com. You can also hit us up on the Instagram or just check out our Instagram at Star Trek Toys. Yeah, we got that.
Yeah,
and I think those are the best ways. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. It actually helps. I was always wondering why people ask people to do that. It actually helps the algorithm, and hit that notification bell because I think that does something. Definitely lets you know when our next video drops because we don't even know. But until then, Keith, I know you have some episodes to prep, so we shall see you the next time on... Look at my Star Trek Toys!